Hi, I am Sergey Beloy, and this video is devoted to showing clear parallels between an ongoing scandal around Rupert Murdoch, which has brought his multi-billion empire to its knees, and the InfoSpace Incorporated. Let's start from recalling a reason why Rupert Murdoch's business is crashing down so rapidly. His News of the World newspaper, with a respectable 168 years history, was shut down in a single week since mass media started revealing just few details on how the company was doing its business. Why? Obviously, one reason was that advertisers decided to cancel their business relations with the News of the World. Ford Motor Company pulled all its ads from the News of the World, and other companies are considering joining them. The brand was so badly damaged that it made more sense to close the paper, says Professor Stephen Fielding. It's interesting that all that happened despite Mr. Murdoch, as well as other his chief executive officers, claiming they did not know about what company's illegal phone hacking practice. By the way, compared with InfoSpace, where all chief executives actually knew about my 2D-InfoSpace story, it was simply impossible not to know about it. During the last 9 years, I kept sending a lot of messages, faxes, and signed letters addressed to every chief executive officer personally. However, I wouldn't be surprised if today some of them would simply claim they did not know about it. I bet you will never find any person in InfoSpace who will accept his responsibility for my case. I doubt that even Naveen Jain, who actually started it, will ever say it was him. By the way, I've just published an open letter to Naveen Jain titled "American Billionaire Naveen Jain Achieves His Dreams on the Account of Killing Dreams of a Guy in poor Ukraine." But let's go back to the News of the World. So, speaking in the British Parliament last week, Rupert Murdoch said that none of what happened in his company was his responsibility. He didn't know. Nevertheless, his shareholders have lost more than $5 billion in market value in just 2 weeks, just because Murdoch and Rebecca Brooks claim ignorance about the hacking scandal doesn't mean they weren't responsible, says the Daily Beast in its edition of July 21st, titled "Rupert's Willful Ignorance." News International should be seen as a rogue organization, not as an organization with rogue reporters buried deep inside it. It may well be true that Brooks and Murdoch never told anyone to hack into $1 cell phone, not even knew that it had happened, but that doesn't mean they weren't responsible for it. What main assets of any company are, from investors' point of view? Buildings, hardware, technologies? No, it's people. Speaking about InfoSpace, I seriously doubt its shareholders or investors will ever learn about me and my story from InfoSpace top managers. But, in addition to chief executives, there has been a great number of people in InfoSpace who knew about my case. There were people in support services, and even a secretary of the InfoSpace's president who processed my faxes I sent to InfoSpace. It might be there were assistants for each chief executive. The list of people involved is really big. They read my letters. They discussed them with other InfoSpace employees. They might be laughed between themselves on my desperate attempts to achieve a justice who I am and who InfoSpace is. In any case, they were definitely discussing my story between themselves, and they did nothing to change it. For example, Stacy Ybarra, currently a main PR manager of InfoSpace, to whom I emailed a lot of messages, mainly because it's practically the only contact emailed the huge corporation put on its official websites. Therefore, each my message to her always includes a polite appeal to forward it to InfoSpace chief executives. So I sent her tons of messages during the last several years, to which she never replied me back. Maybe thinking, why would she? Especially after I told her in a very last letter that I was trying to speak with her predecessor, as well as predecessor of the predecessors, obviously without any response from each of them. By the way, I have kept Stacy informed about every video letter the moment it's published on YouTube. What is more important, before InfoSpace annual shareholding meetings in the beginning of June, I even explicitly asked her, as a chief PR manager, to let shareholders know about the existence of these video letters. Did they ever hear about me from InfoSpace after all? David Binder, current Chief Financial Officer of InfoSpace, is about to resign. In just 3 weeks he is going to become a Chief Financial Officer in another online company, Blue Nile, where he's offered a quite decent salary and generous bonuses totaling in hundreds of thousands of dollars. In addition, just for signing the contract, the Blue Nile pays him $25,000. I've never had this amount of cash in my life, and David will easily get it just for agreeing to accept a very generous job offer. Why I'm mentioning this? David Binder knew about my 2D-InfoSpace story. He was the vice president of InfoSpace since 2004. It was in his power, and it still is in his power, for the next 2 weeks, to initiate a fair settlement for my case, but he didn't, and obviously not going to. You know, this is a typical story with all InfoSpace's chief executives. They all knew about the cruel and illegal InfoWars the company started to obtain rights for my 2D-InfoSpace domains, and they all did nothing about it. I guess InfoSpace people have a completely false assumption that each of them, if taken separately, personally, not responsible for what InfoSpace did to me. I guess InfoSpace people have a completely false assumption that each of them, if taken separately, personally, not responsible for what InfoSpace did to me. They all want to believe that when someday they walk away from InfoSpace, the responsibility for my story will immediately evaporate. They seriously believe they will be able to start a completely new, fair life then, to find a new job, obviously with a high American salary, and to keep living their comfortable, super paid lives. As Naveen describes his specialty at LinkedIn today, enjoying life and never look back to what they could but never did working in InfoSpace. Today Naveen Binder is about to do this. Very soon he's going to start a new life in a very decent business called Blue Nile. Then he will be able to simply forget about my story and become a quite respectable VIP in a respectable business. As I told in my previous video, during many years Naveen Jain and his InfoSpace have been trying to pay for achieving their dreams with the money they owe to me, and on the expense of killing my dream. Similarly, the Chief Financial Officer of InfoSpace, David Binder, wouldn't be offered a job in a respectable company, if any at all, if shareholders learned that during many years he hid from them the need to pay a settlement for my case, which because of that was put on today's constantly raised price scale of 1 million per day. And the same could be said about every InfoSpace Chief Executive Officer. The reason why Murdoch's News of the World was crashed down was a rough business climate planted deeply in its culture. That's why I'm linking that example with business practice in Naveen Jain's InfoSpace, which exists up to now.